That the reptile things attack me for this is blasphemy. Let us begin! Yes!
In the long history of the old world, rivalries between mighty figures did more than settle personal scores. They toppled kingdoms, reshaped borders, and steered the fate of entire peoples. Today we follow the scars that shaped the world that was, where oaths and grudges plunged entire nations into war, and the names of enemies became rallying cries. What happens when Grombrindal plans his oath stone against the Witch King Malekith? When Queek's trophy rack pushes High King Thorgrim to settle the account in person? When Settra wakes to a stolen afterlife? Or when Gotrek hunts the schemes of Thanquol through cities and underways? In this video we will go through these rivalries and more, laying out the lore, the stakes, and why each feud mattered to the peoples caught in their path. Gotrek GURNISSON, a dwarf slayer, met the poet Felix Jaeger in Altdorf around the year 2495 of the imperial calendar. Felix swore an oath to record the slayer's death, then followed him into a life of monster hunting across the old world. Their paths crossed early with Grey Seer Thanquol, an ambitious Skaven sorcerer whose plans always seemed on the edge of success before collapsing in fire and panic. Thanquol would become their most persistent foe, returning again and again with new plots, new allies, and a rebuilt rat ogre bodyguard each time the last one was destroyed. The first major clash unfolded in and under the city of Nuln. Thanquol worked with Clan Scryer engineers and assassins to sabotage the College of Engineering and to unleash warpstone-powered weapons in the streets and sewers. The city's authorities barely believed Skaven existed, which gave the Grey Seer cover to move war machines and killers through the underways. Gotrek and Felix cut into that network, fought through gangs of Skaven and wrecked devices that could have blasted districts apart. Thanquol fled when the plot failed, leaving one of his bone rippers in pieces behind him. The feud spread across the map after Nuln. Thanquol resurfaced in fresh cells and temples, always with a different patron clan and a new angle. He tried to steal secrets, collapse dwarf holds, and ignite wars among humans, while Gotrek and Felix arrived at the worst possible moment for him and hacked the heart out of the scheme. Thanquol's methods mixed sorcery, poisoned diplomacy, and unstable scryer contraptions. Gotrek answered with direct violence, dwarf runecraft, and an iron refusal to die. Time after time, the Grey Seer escaped at the last instant, cheated of triumph by the Slayer's axe, Felix's courage, or the backstabbing that Skaven call normal politics. During the End Times, spanning the years 2519 to 2528 of the Imperial calendar, both adversaries were drawn into greater storms. Thanquol rose in Skaven esteem, directing major operations for the Council of 13 while still nursing his hatred for the pair who had ruined so many of his plans. Gotrek fought on through disasters that broke kingdoms, surviving by stubborn will even as the world cracked. Their rivalry did not resolve in a final duel, yet its pressure shaped battles and cities, since every time Thanquol committed forces or scarce devices to destroy his two enemies, he risked the failure of larger plans. This feud mattered because it exposed Skaven threats that would have remained hidden, and it protected key centers of learning and industry, especially Nuln. For the Skaven, it became a drain on resources as the Grey Seer threw assassins, warlocks and bone rippers after a single slayer and his human companion. For the dwarfs and the Empire, it proved that one relentless warrior could keep a city standing and force the rat men into the open. Gotrek and Thanquol defined each other. The Slayer could not find a worthy death because the Grey Seer never quite managed a clean victory. And the Grey Seer could not claim his moment of twisted glory because the Slayer always arrived to ruin the moment. ASAVAR Kul rose as Everchosen of Chaos and united tribes across the Chaos Wastes before sweeping south into Kislev in the year 2302 of the Imperial calendar. The empowered and rising forces of Chaos managed to get to the city of Prague, which was packed with stalwart and determined defenders. When Prague fell and was twisted into a nightmare ruin, the Horde turned towards the city of Kislev itself. The Empire was divided and faltering until Magnus of Nuln stepped forward. Preaching unity under Sigmar and calling the provinces to muster, he secured oaths from Elector Counts, won aid from the dwarfs, and welcomed High Elf envoys led by Teclis, whose counsel on wizardry would soon change the course of Imperial arms. The allied host reached Kislev in the year 2303 of the Imperial calendar. Outside the city walls, a vast battle raged as Chaos champions sought to break the line. In the press of that struggle, Magnus met ASAVAR Kul in single combat, and a fierce combat ensued. Using all his might, Magnus slew the ASAVAR Kul, while dwarf throngs and Kislevite cavalry shattered the Everchosen's bodyguard. With their warlord dead, the northern horde faltered and was driven back from the gates. Kislev endured, though scarred, and the road south into the Empire was saved. Magnus was hailed Emperor in the following year after this victory and became known as Magnus the Pious. Under Teclis he founded the colleges of magic in Altdorf, so that human sorcery would be studied and disciplined rather than feared and left to fester. For the Empire, this rivalry determined survival at a moment when faith and alliance were all that stood between order and ruin. For Chaos, it ended a major invasion, and proved that an Everchosen could be brought down by mortal will. The outcome shaped centuries of policy, from imperial military reforms to lasting ties with dwarfs and high elves, and it fixed the memory of Magnus and Kul as opposing measures of courage and dread in the chronicles of the old world. Grom the Paunch rose from misty mountains to command a vast greenskin horde, then spent years battering the dwarfs and ravaging imperial provinces. His war spanned the years 2410 to 2424 of the imperial calendar. After these victories he built a ramshackle fleet and turned west across the great ocean toward Ulthuan. A move no greenskin warlord had ever achieved at such scale. Grom made landfall in Yvres late in that campaign. Tor Yvres's army was shattered outside its walls, and the kingdom reeled as goblins toppled waystones that held ancient magics in balance, unleashing quakes and chaos across the island of Ulthuan. The fighting reached its height in the year 2425 of the Imperial calendar, when Prince ELTHARION marshalled a hard-pressed defense and broke Grom's horde. ELTHARION wounded the warlord in personal combat, and Grom fled the field. Many chronicles claim the goblin died from those wounds during the voyage home, but his death has not been entirely confirmed. In the aftermath, ELTHARION was named the Warden of Tor Yvres, and set about rebuilding the ruined city and its watch. His rule is recorded as beginning in the year 2425 of the Imperial calendar, and from that point he became the grim champion most associated with Yvres' survival. He strengthened coastal patrols, restored fortifications, and drilled a rapid response host to meet any future landing. The sack of Tor-Ivres forced the High Elves to harden their coastal doctrine, to guard waystones more closely, and to invest in the defence of the eastern shores as never before. Eltharion's reforms and reputation became a rallying point for a kingdom that had seen part of its pride reduced to rubble. For the Greenskins, however, the episode forged a legend. Grom became the only Goblin Lord remembered for striking at Ulthuan itself, yet his defeat by Eltharion set a limit on that boast. The tale fixed both figures in history. Grom's audacity showed what a rising war could attempt after years of success on the mainland. Eltharion's victory ensured that future raids would meet awards and prepared for them, and that Tor-Ivres would endure under a prince shaped by war. Karak Eight Peaks, was once the pride of Clan Angrund. But the hold fell when Greenskins and Skaven overwhelmed it from above and below, forcing King Lun and the survivors to abandon their ancient city. For centuries after, the ruins became a three-sided battleground where dwarfs, night goblins and Skaven gnawed at one another in the dark. BELEGAR IRONHAMMER, Lun's descendant, swore to reclaim his birthright and led a new reconquest during the years 2420 to 2498 of the Imperial calendar, carving out a foothold on the surface and upper levels while enemies pressed them from every tunnel. Thorgrim Grudgebearer rallied the clans to support Belegar in his perilous quest. Thorek Ironbrow armed the throngs with rune-wrought axes and armour. The dwarfs punched back into the city and fortified what territory they took. SKARSNIK, chieftain of the Crooked Moon and self-proclaimed warlord of the Eight Peaks, met them with numbers, patience, and cunning traps. He tested the gates with mass assaults, then shifted to traps, diversions, and cut supply lines, turning every sortie into a risky affair. The result was a grinding siege that fixed thousands of warriors in place and bled all three sides year after year. In the year 2498 of the Imperial calendar, SKARSNIK sprang two decisive blows in the passes that feed the fortress. He ambushed a dwarf relief column at Mad Dog Pass in the Battle of the Jaws, then mauled the survivors again at the Battle of the East Gate. Half the dwarf host still slipped into Belegar Citadel, but from that day, SKARSNIK kept the Angrid foothold penned behind walls and kill zones, scalping beards and displaying them within sight of the ramparts to break morale. This only enraged the pinned dwarves, who were slowly running out of supplies and reinforcements. The rivalry became personal. Belegar mastered close-quarter tunnel war and led constant thrusts into the underhalls. SKARSNIK answered with deeper feints and the sudden fury of squig packs. More than once, Gobbler, SKARSNIK's giant cave squig, nearly swallowed the dwarf king whole. Belegar's shield of defiance and oath stone kept him alive, and inch by inch the dwarfs bricked shut breaches and walled off tainted vaults to deny their foe room to maneuver. The city turned into a maze of strong points, where every victory was measured in small advances, and every step forward was paid in blood. The end times broke the stalemate. From late 2523 IC, Skaven musters surged through the deeps while SKARSNIK and Belegar still fought over the upper ways. After the Battle of the Hall of Skalfdun, the dwarfs were pressed back into a final redoubt. Their last stand in the Hall of Pillared Iron ended with Belegar slain in single combat by Queek HEADTAKER, and the dwarf claim fell silent as the wider war consumed the mountains. The feud mattered because Karak Eight Peaks was more than stone. For the dwarfs it was a lost capital, whose recovery would have bound the eastern roots and revived a kingdom. For the Night Goblins, it was a crown won by cunning that proved a greenskin could rule the deeps. Their long struggle fixed armies, shaped campaign maps, and kept Karak 8 Peaks in a state of perpetual war until the world itself ended. Snorri Whitebeard forged the ancient alliance between dwarfs and elves, and in those elder days the young Prince Malekith fought beside the dwarfs against common enemies. Centuries later, that bond failed. It all started when Dark Elf raiders operating in disguise attacked dwarf interests in the old world to inflame suspicion. The dwarfs demanded a weir guild for the losses, but the proud Phoenix King Calador II refused and ordered a dwarf envoy shamed by the shaving of his beard. A bloody war followed. The conflict the dwarfs call the War of Vengeance and the elves call the War of the Beard. The turning points are clear. At the final siege of Tor Alessi, High King Gotrek Starbreaker killed Calador II and took the Phoenix Crown as recompense for earlier royal murders, ending the war even as it left both realms exhausted. The elves withdrew their colonies to defend Ulthuan, while the dwarves entered the time of woes as quakes and collapses ravaged the Underway and its many ancient hall and mine networks. These dates fixed Malekith's name to the origin of the rift for dwarf chroniclers, since the Druki campaign of disguised raids and the humiliation at Lothern were seen as a betrayal of Snorri's oath of friendship with the elves. Out of that ruined trust grew a figure who turned legend into action. In later centuries, the White Dwarf, Grombrindal, appeared wherever the holds were in peril, most often where Dark Elf slavers and Black Ark fleet haunted. He broke slave pens, led shield walls that held under sorcery, and cut supply from corsair ports. Dwarf tradition holds that Grombrindal is Snorri Whitebeard returned, sent in the hour of greatest need to settle the ancient grudge with Malekith. For Karazankor, the rivalry shaped coastlines and fleets. Patrols from Barak Var hardened into a standing naval doctrine. Runecraft was defined to blunt, cold sorcery, and coastal holds strengthened watchtowers to counter arc landings. Every safe convoy kept a hold alive. Every broken slaving run denied Naggaroth the labour that fed its forges. The effect was strategic as well as symbolic, since grinding down Druki sea power bled Malekith's economy while preserving dwarf trade. Malekith ruled a realm built on chains, and saw the dwarves as stone to be broken. Grombrindal existed to deny that view, and to show the holds that oaths still bound the living to the deeds of their ancestors. The rivalry preserved the memory of the War of Vengeance in every Karazankor chronicle, and ensured that Malekith's name remained inked deep in the Great Book of Grudges. Even when centuries passed without a great battle between them, the presence of the White Dwarf turned each Druki raid into an opportunity for payment in kind, keeping the original betrayal alive in law, in policy, and in the choices of both civilizations. Oh, Queek HEADTAKER. He was the terror of Clan Morse, a Skaven warlord who built his name by hunting dwarf nobles and taking their heads as trophies. His back banner carried skulls and his armour was spiked with proof of past kills. The bloodiest chapter of his career unfolded at Karak 8 Peaks, the ruined hold that 3 powers fought over for generations. In the end times, Queek led Clan Morse in a relentless assault through the lower walls, driving the dwarf defenders back step by step until King Belegar Ironhammer was forced into a last stand in the Hall of Pillared Iron. There, after a brutal duel, and with only a remnant of his throng still alive around him, Belegar fell to Queek. The loss of the true king of 8 Peaks left a raw scar in dwarf memory, and added a fresh, heavy entry to the great book of grudges. For the Skaven, however, the victory crowned Queek as master of the depths beneath 8 Peaks and proved the worth of his savage methods. For the dwarfs, it turned a long rivalry into a personal obligation for their High King to settle in person. The reckoning came soon after. With 8 Peaks in Skaven claws, Queek was sent to aid the siege of Karazakarak, the dwarf capital. The Council of 13 promised high reward to any Skaven who could bring them Thorgrim Grudgebearer's head, which drew Queek toward the Everpeak in search of one last glorious kill. On the field outside the mountain, the High King met the HEADTAKER in single combat, but the Skaven warlord underestimated the High King's might. Thorgrim, a mighty warrior in his own right and fueled by centuries of grudges and the recent loss of Karak 8 Peaks, fought with unmatched determination. The duel was decidedly one-sided. Thorgrim overpowered Queek, likely aided by a previous wound Queek had suffered from Belegar Ironhammer in the final battle for Karak 8 Peaks. As he battered the Skaven warlord, Thorgrim recited Queek's numerous crimes from the Book of Grudges. The High King methodically destroyed Queek's prized possessions, first smashing his enchanted weapon, Dwarf Gouger, with which the warlord had ended so many lives. Then the High King proceeded to cut away his trophy rack of skulls and trophies, finally putting them to rest. Trapped in Thorgrim's unyielding grip, Queek thrashed wildly and grasped for air as the Dwarf King bellowed the list of ancient grudges held against the warlord. Still, the Skaven warlord clawed at his foe, even as his own claws tore and bled on the king's impenetrable armour.
My sword!
And lastly, hear me, you ancestor gods. Bear witness to this final wrong by this putrid, pox-ridden, vermin scum in my righteous hands. It is written that rat-filled Queek HEADTAKER did on the 17th day in the year 7045 extinguish the mighty Belegar Ironhammer at Karak 8 Peaks. But deliver me, O gods, as on this day High King Thorgrim doth eagerly repay the rat scum filth and write his name off the book as Thorgrim strangles Queek HEADTAKER by the neck and breaks it just like this!
Finally, after listing the death of Belegar Ironhammer among Queek's crimes, Thorgrim ended the duel by crushing Queek's neck with his bare hands. The death of Queek HEADTAKER was a significant moment for the dwarfs, as they avenged a long-standing grudge. The victory was bittersweet though, as later the High King himself would be killed by none other than Deathmaster Snitch, who had managed to sneak undetected deep into the chambers of the Everpeak. Sometime later, the World's Edge Mountains themselves would be overrun not only by the colossal Skaven tide that had risen to take over the world, but by the fires and raw energies of chaos unleashed during the final battle for the world that was. Settra the Imperishable lived in the age when the human cities of Nehekara were many and divided. With time, audacity and cunning, he eventually conquered them, forged a single empire and ruled from Khemri with absolute authority. Determined that his reign would never end, he charged the mortuary cult to prepare a perfect awakening after death, so that he would lead his people forever, when the spell for eternal life was eventually discovered by the cult. Settra eventually died at the height of his power, and was entombed with armies and monuments to serve him in the world beyond. Only after Settra's death did Nagash rise to dominance in Khemri. He was a high priest who mastered forbidden law, built the Black Pyramid, and turned the rituals of the mortuary cult towards true necromancy. His experiments shattered the balance of the kingdoms and spread corruption to Lamia, where the first vampires were born. Civil war followed. With Nehekara weakened, Nagash attempted a single grand spell that scoured life from the land and awakened the dead in their tombs. The living perished. The dead opened their eyes. Settra eventually awakened as an eternal king, but not in the paradise he had been promised. He found a desert of sand and bones where his living empire had stood. The theft of his afterlife fixed his hatred on Nagash forever. Soon after the great spell, the captive king Alcatazar killed Nagash with the Fellblade, and the binding that would have made all Tomb King slaves to one will failed. Settra reclaimed Khemri and began a new reign as an undying monarch, swearing that no power would rule over his people but his own. This feud mattered because it set the fate of every corpse laid in Nehekar stone. Nagash wanted one master over all the dead, a single army to serve his ambition. Settra refused that order completely. Across the centuries he crushed Nagash's cults, punished vampire intrigues that reached from Lamia's legacy, and fought Arkan the Black, each time the lieutenant gathered relics to prepare for his master's return. Under Settra, the Tomb Kings remained sovereign rulers of their cities, each legion loyal to its own lord and to Khemri above all. When Nagash finally returned in the last days, he tried to bend the Tomb Kings to his purpose and offered Settra a seat among his chosen. How audacious. Settra answered with the words that define him. Settra does not serve. Settra rules. Nagash destroyed his body in fury, but even that did not erase his will or his example. Their rivalry shaped the deserts for ages. It preserved the Tomb Kings as proud monarchs rather than conscripts of a single necromancer, and it set the tone for every war waged in the south between Khemri and the followers of Nagash. Malekith's claim to the Phoenix throne ended in fire when he entered the sacred flames of Azurian. The flames rejected him and he fled, and the elven civil war known as the Sundering began soon after. That war split the elves into two nations, the High Elves of Ulthuan and the Dark Elves of Naggaroth. From the High Elf view, this was the first great cause of the feud. Malekith had tried to take the crown by force and sorcery, then led invasions and raids against Ulthuan for centuries afterward. From the Dark Elf view, Malekith believed the throne should have been his by right as the son of an Aryan, and every defeat only hardened his resolve to return. Prince Tyrion rose much later as Ulthuan's foremost champion. Famous for his skill at arms and for saving his homeland many times, he became known as a defender of Ulthuan. His rise gave the High Elves a living counter to the Witch King's legend, and their names became the two poles of elven history. When Malekith gathered strength, Tyrion led armies that met him. When the Dark Elves struck by sea, Tyrion was the sword that answered from the coast of Etain to the passes of Calador. Their rivalry reached its height during the End Times. In the Bloody Campaign, Malekith invaded Ulthuan while Tyrion took up the Sword of Cain on the Blighted Isle and became the avatar of the elven war god. With the Widowmaker in his hands, Tyrion gained terrible power, and also the curse that once marked Anarion, which darkened his judgment while it sharpened his skill at arms. The climactic clash came on the Isle of the Dead in the year 2526 of the Imperial calendar. As Teclis worked a powerful ritual at the Great Vortex, Malekith and Tyrion finally met in single combat amid a battle that shattered Ulthuan's last defences. Tyrion forced Malekith to the ground and was about to deliver the killing stroke when Alithanar's arrow struck Tyrion through a rent in his armour. Tyrion died, and Teclis spirited Malekith away as the ritual unravelled. The vortex collapsed, the winds of magic were loosed, and Ulthuan tore apart and sank into the sea. After the island battle, the surviving elves gathered at Athelloren under Malekith and Everqueen Alariel. Malekith was crowned the Eternity King, ending the ancient division in the only way still possible as the world staggered towards its end. The rivalry began with a disputed crown that birthed 6,000 years of war, and it concluded with one last duel that decided who would lead the remnants of an entire people through the final days of the world. Tehannoween's rivalry with Lord Skrolk grew from the oldest recorded war between lizardmen and Skaven. Clan Pestilens reached Lustria from the Under-Empire and unleashed plagues that blackened spawning pools and rotted whole districts of Chaqua. The prophecy of Sotek spoke of a twin-tailed comet and of a serpent god who would one day deliver the lizardmen from the ratmen. When the omen burned in the sky and Chaqua faltered, Tehannoween rose from among the red-crested skinks to lead a desperate resistance and to gather captives for sacrifice to Sotek. The long conflict remembered as the rise of Sotek is dated from around the year 1339 of the Imperial calendar and endured for many centuries after that first outbreak. As Tehannoween rallied to temple cities, his followers seized Skaven prisoners and offered them upon new altars to call the serpent god into the world. Accounts describe serpent swarms overrunning Skaven lairs and resisting every plague clan pestilent brood, driving the rat men from their tunnels into open killing grounds. After a grinding war that devastated many ancient temples and other parts of Lustria, the surviving plague lords abandoned the continent and fled by ship toward the Southlands. The lizard men held the jungles, the cult of Sotek spread, and Tehannoween's leadership fixed the idea that faith and sacrifice had turned back an enemy that could not be met by steel alone. The prophet of Sotek remained a figure of action in later centuries. Lizardmen records place him leading the Red Host in strikes against Skaven strongholds whenever omens demanded it. One campaign notes a foiled Skaven superweapon at Slagmire around the year 2502 of the Imperial calendar, after a prolonged fight in caverns and swamps. Another example that shows that Clan Pestilens never ceased its search for a decisive blow. During the end times, Skrolk commanded new musters of Clan Pestilens in a series of assaults across Lustria. The Red Host of Tehannoween answered again. In the year 2523, Tehannoween marched to relieve the first city of Itza while Skrolk drove the Skaven horde to its outer districts. Chameleon skinks cut the Skaven rearguard to pieces. Storms broke over the walls, and the lizardmen counterattack saved the city for a time. The Itza fighting marked the most direct crossing of the two leaders' paths, one as the prophet of Sotek, and the other as the blind master of plagues sent to unmake the city that had anchored the lizardmen since the dawn of their history. This rivalry mattered because it defined how lizardmen and Skaven contested Lustria for hundreds of years. Tehannoween's rise affirmed the cult of Sotek and set a pattern of relentless jungle warfare, sacrificial rites, and ambush doctrine that bled Skaven strength each time they returned. Skrog's campaigns forced the lizard men to commit elite hosts and to spend precious magic holding diseased ground that could never fully heal. Strategically, the rise of Sotek pushed Clan Pestilence out of Lustria and reshaped Skaven politics, while the end times battles kept the continent contested until the very last years of the world. Boris Todbringer, Elector Count of Middenland and Lord of Middenheim, made the Drakwold Forest his life's hunt. Khazrak, a rare beast lord with patience and cunning, made it his killing ground. Their feud became personal in the year 2518 of the Imperial calendar, when Boris led a great purge of the forest and, at the Battle of Esterweld, tore out one of Khazrak's eyes. From that day, the Beast Lord was known as Khazrak the One-Eye. The very next year, in 2519, Khazrak repaid the injury by ambushing Boris outside Nordringen and taking the Count's right eye, fixing a blood debt that neither would abandon. Through the following campaigns, Khazrak's herds harried roads, farms and timber camps, striking and melting back into the trees before Imperial musters could catch them. He was notorious for coordinating ambushes that scattered relief columns and for keeping unruly war herds in line, an unusual trait among beastmen leaders. Boris answered with road wardens, hunts and burnings of tainted glades, yet Khazrak always seemed to slip away to strike again. Their rivalry reached a final height during the end times. In the autumn of the year 2527 of the Imperial calendar, the Beast Lord lured Boris into the Drakwold for a last confrontation that ended in a Beastmen victory, even as greater wars raged around Middenheim. Before being devoured by the Beastmen around him though, Boris managed to kill his nemesis, putting an end to the hatred-fueled rivalry. That brings our tour of grudges and rivalries to an end. Now it is your turn. Which rivalry struck you the hardest, and why? If you had to stand on one field, would it be the Keys of Baragvar, the Gates of Kislev, the Halls of Eight Peaks, or the Walls of Tor Ivres? Which champion deserves a full deep dive next? We hope you have enjoyed this episode. You can also check out our latest released episode or go to our exploration of the greatest melee fighters in Warhammer Fantasy. We hope to see you on the next one.